One of the small details I like the most on guitars is having rounded fretboard corners at the neck joint. The fretboard in this kit did not have this, so I used my Strat as a template to achieve the same type of rounding. It makes zero difference to the playability of the instrument, but it's a nice touch, and it shows some of the effort that went towards building it. This is what it ended up looking like. Another thing I had to do for the left-handed conversion was to install fret markers. The fretboard already had this element, but on the wrong side. I tried to be as accurate as possible with measuring, knowing that mounting any of the markers off-center would be a constant source of irritation in the future. I settled for a simple solution in the form of toothpicks. The wood they're made of is nothing special, but it gets the job done. I worked on this part late at night and managed to calm myself as a result of not paying enough attention. 5 minutes and a band-aid later and I was back on track. I leveled everything with the sanding block and got the sides of the fretboard looking and feeling smooth again. A couple of markers don't look perfectly round, and one of them has a bit of chipping in the surrounding wood, but overall they're good enough. I have no desire to make this guitar perfect in any way, as long as it's functional and comfortable to play. There was one issue I hadn't noticed before. On one side, the fretboard itself was a few millimeters narrower than the neck. This was only the case for the first few frets, but it was enough to require some additional work. Luckily, I was able to sand down the wood without reshaping the neck profile visibly. The next part was making sure that the headstock piece, if that's what it's called, fit well. Again, based on past experience, I should have expected the answer to be not really. The surface that's supposed to come in contact with the wood had a couple of lumps, which prevented the piece from laying flat. I assume these were unintended artifacts caused during casting. The angle on the piece did not match perfectly either. It mostly matched the shape of the neck, but there was one section where you could easily spot a small gap between the two. I tried my best to adjust and remove it. It might have been just fine to install the piece like that, but I was afraid of losing some sustain due to uneven contact. Mounting was fairly easy. There are two holes that hold the piece in place with a couple of screws. As it happens, this is where I discovered my biggest gripe with this project. The hardware quality is bad. One of the screws simply broke while I was trying to unscrew it, so I was essentially left with a metal shard stuck inside the wood. I had no patience for stuff like this, so I moved on as if nothing happened, planning to deal with it later. Finishing the neck was a bit of a process. I don't like painted or glossy finishes. The most comfortable neck I ever played is on my American Professional Strat, which has a satin finish. I was aiming for a similar texture, but didn't know exactly how to achieve it. After some research, I decided to use teak oil. I applied a few coats with enough time in between for the oil to get absorbed. From some point onward, I couldn't really see any difference in applying more, but I also wasn't completely happy with the texture. It felt somewhat tacky, even after removing the excess with paper towels and giving it enough time to dry. The thing that actually made a difference was steel wool. It was coarse enough to remove the tacky feeling, but also not too abrasive to bite into the wood. In the end, I got somewhat close to what I wanted. It's still a world of difference between this and the Strat, but it's more comfortable than other guitars I played and much better than raw wood. The fretboard was a much simpler process. All it took was a few coats of lemon oil and enough time in between to let it sink into the wood. I spread this across multiple days since the wood was completely dry initially, and it took a while for it to develop a smooth sheen. Now to get back to the broken screw. What turned out to be a feasible solution was drilling small holes around the screw. Once I freed up enough space around it, I was able to hold it with pliers and slowly unscrew it fully. I know there are special drill bits designed specifically for this use case, but I don't have any and they don't seem to be that widespread either. I plugged the hole with the end of a painting brush and sealed it with super glue. You can clearly see the place where a hole used to be, but it's not that important since the whole section gets covered anyway. One more thing, this time I made sure to use proper screws. There was some more work to be done here, but I set it aside for later and moved on to painting the body.